back now with attorneys Juan Gomez and Curtis Hunter. And Curtis, before we went to break, I wanted to let you.
I just want to respond to some of Professor Gomez's last comments. Up to this point, we've been talking about illegal border crossings, and there's one easy solution, and that's port of entry. We are a compassionate country, welcome everybody, provided they do it the legal way. And again, nobody wants to see children separated from parents, but if they go through a port of entry, do it the legal way, go through the processing, understand it's a long time, can be costly, but that's really the only way to protect the border. And through all this, the primary goal is to protect the border, protect the American citizens that are living here. To me, an equally important goal is to protect the children that are coming. And the trek, seeing interviews with Border Patrol agents that see this on a day in and day out basis, seeing preteen girls coming with Plan B pills, birth control, because their parents have told them to expect to be, raped or taken advantage of on the way up here. I can imagine what kind of conditions they live in to allow a child to actually go through that trek. But it's these laws and DHS policies are designed a lot of reason for the procedure is to protect the child. To me, I've seen this week that there's a presidential candidate in Mexico now that he's leading in the polls, probably be the next president, Lopez Obrador, and he's on record as saying every migrant has a right to enter the United States, and he's going to protect them and shield them on their way to the border, and in fact has even contemplated giving amnesty to some of the drug cartels who own and control a lot of the regions in Mexico. So again, Border Patrol is very, very important. And if we have a president of Mexico, and that's his stance now before he's even elected, it's even more important that we've got to get control of the border.
But part of the problem
I want to ask you about that. We are a nation of laws. There are millions of people who apply for asylum. They do it the legal way. They wait in line.
They're being cut off. That's the problem. One, you have the most recent decision cut off. If you read a case called Matter of AB, you see that they're basically creating the equivalent. In my jargon, it would be pretermission, but in your world, it would be summary judgment. Mm-hmm. And so you can't do that in asylum. One. The second part is that, for example, if you go through asylum offices through the United States, you'll find people who were normally refugee processing officers from abroad. In other words, people we had delegated to different parts of the world, and those people are now here because we irresponsibly cut off normal processing of refugees, because it's not a question that...
if I can interrupt you, what is the cut? I'm not following on the cutoff. What happens?
There are two things. One is, if an immigration judge or the Board of Immigration Appeals were to find that there's what they call a fatal flaw, in other words, a failure to state a claim. The problem is that you have a lawyer can formulate...
These are immigrants seeking asylum.
Immigrants seeking asylum. Okay. And the problem is that if you fail to state a full claim, and the problem, I'll give you this, the domestic violence case, which is the underlying case in this situation. Mm-hmm. One of the problems that you face is that back since Attorney General Ashcroft and before, actually, we had been developing for more than a decade the issues of what areas related to domestic violence fit into the asylum mold in which do not. The problem is that you just need to let the law develop. We have courts, we have mechanisms.
There's also significant abuse of the law, so.
But the thing is that and think of it in terms of criminal justice. In criminal justice, we are willing to try people, and there's abuse on the side of forcing people into pleas. And we have to be careful, because we have a mechanism. If there's a finding that you've made a frivolous application for asylum, which means you lied, you are barred for life. We have the laws, but the thing is though that we are cutting off not just in the substance of presenting a claim. And think about it, there's a significant difference when a person is represented versus when a person is unrepresented. Most individuals in asylum proceedings are not represented, and this is a problem. Most individuals are, if you and I were here, you were the government attorney, you're the judge, and I'm the respondent, you would speak in English to each other, but in most immigration courts, there is no full participation. And so you have two people speaking a foreign language, speaking legalese to each other, which is in a way ex parte, right? And then you have the pro se individual over here sitting, wondering, what are they talking about?
But they're represented by an attorney or agent at that.
No, most people are not. That's the problem.
Well, I've been involved, worked with a nonprofit organization and doing intake for unaccompanied minors. And the abuse, part of the abuse I'm referring to is the several teenage kids that I interviewed had the script to a T. They knew verbatim exactly what to say for the asylum process. There's border agents that are saying that children are coming in and they're all saying the exact same thing. They know exactly what to say for the asylum report. They said, one Border Patrol in an interview I saw this week even said one of the kids had the script written down on a piece of paper in his pocket.
But
so that's just part of the abuse.
But there's
the other abuse is if I can finish, the other abuse is the Flores settlement, is that individuals coming from other countries know if they come with a child in tow within 20 days, which has happened since 2014, within 20 days or 30 days, they're going to be released in society, which has happened since 2014. 500,000 illegal immigrants have been dispersed into the society since 2014.
And we have,
because of the Flores settlement.
We have the mechanisms, we have the training. Back in 1990, in 1980,
what is the mechanism?
The mechanism is in 1990 we passed the Refugee Act. We tried to codify our treaty obligations and tried to make asylum law fair, so that it covers political opinion, which is extraordinarily complicated, race, religion, nationality, right? And then there's this sort of odd concept of particular social group. You can't imagine the volumes of litigation on trying to define what this is.
I've seen it.
Now, that said, what happens is that asylum officers are trained to try to distinguish between those, and you have people everywhere. It's like here, when someone tells you, I am this, 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 then it's only in the substance. Only when you're talking to the person, when you're having a detailed conversation, can you tell whether this person is telling you the truth or not.
I had detailed conversations with these kids. And that was, again, part of the problem as well is, after I do the intake, they have a court date they have to come back for. Only 3% of people come back for their court dates.
Not, I mean, forgive me, but I mean,
I saw it this week.
That statistic is not
right. From the DOJ.
No, that is incorrect, because the people who were processed, monitored, and you would see it's an extraordinary, like 95, 98.
Gentlemen, can we pick this up
monitors.
after the break? I want to get into the political ramifications of all of this as well, but we need to take a quick break. We'll be right back.